Well, usually it's parents who inquire about prenuptial agreements for their adult children, but it seems the tables are being turned. With people living longer, divorce among seniors is on the rise, and adult children are often stepping up to protect their parents' wealth. Ron Shulman is the founder of Shulman Law. He's witnessed this trend and spoke to CTV chief financial commentator Patty Levitt-Reid about the potential pitfalls of seniors living in common law relationships.
For years, we have seen parents push their children, encourage their children to get prenups or cohabitation agreements. And what's interesting with great divorces on the rise is that now we're seeing more and more children pushing their parents and encouraging their parents on their second relationship will go get a cohabitation agreement.
Now, is there concern that there's a predatory approach of maybe a parent entering into a new relationship, maybe with someone that doesn't have money?
Well, that's definitely one of the concerns. But also the other concern here is that when we're talking about the retired population seniors, we're talking about people with wealth, but limited. This wealth is supposed to last them through their retirement. But we're also talking great divorce with people who went through a divorce. So their wealth has already been probably halved. So now they have half of that wealth, they're going into a second relationship. There are legal consequences which they may not be aware of. And at the same time, their children are encouraging them that, well, you need to get a cohabitation agreement.
Because in many cases, they may decide not to get married, but just simply to live with someone. And there are consequences, particularly, is there a 3-year threshold here?
Well, and this is what I find when I speak to clients, they're very surprised. Because initially when they come in, and I'm sure viewers may be surprised as well, is that they think that just by the fact that they're not marrying, they may not be exposing their assets. They're immune. Well, this is wrong. Mm-hmm. The reality is there are Ontario common law claims, and property can be exposed. The second misconception, which I find is quite common, is that people think if I don't live together for 3 years in Ontario, I will not be common law, therefore no property will be divisible. No, the 3-year rule applies to spousal support. Mm-hmm. So theoretically and practically, under certain conditions, property could be exposed right away.
Now, when you have children wanting these cohabitation agreements put into place, that's for when the parent is living. When the parent is no longer here, the cohabitation agreement goes by the wayside. Are they concerned, children, that wills will be changed and they may be out of an inheritance that they believe they were entitled to?
Well, sometimes the concern is obviously about the inheritance. Sometimes the concern is about simply the fact of them being concerned for the parents in their retirement. But on the other hand, and what's also on the rise is that many people live and supported by their elderly parents. So they're even adult people, they still get money from their parents. So that may be affected as well.
Sure, it may be compromised.
Yes,
the new relationship may dictate otherwise. So how do families come together and deal with this issue?
Well, the key to this is obviously being open and direct. But what I also advise my clients often is set boundaries. It's great that the children are recommending to go and talk to a lawyer, understand your rights, and get a cohabitation agreement. But at the same time, many times when they come in, I ask the children to stay out of the meeting. Because in the end of the day, the money belongs to the parents. It's not the children's interest which we're there to protect.
Well, it kind of feels like sometimes there's an entitlement mentality. So the children, under the guise of looking after and out for their parents, they may in fact only be looking out for themselves?
It could happen, and this is exactly why as lawyers we make sure that we're very focused on representing our clients and making sure to understand their objectives and what their interests are. And many times we would ask the children to leave and not to be in the meeting or sit outside.
So, Ron, I want to leave with, if you're in a relationship and you're thinking as a senior about cohabitating, what is the one thing that you should tell them they should do before they step through the door?
See a lawyer.
Okay, beyond the lawyer. Yep.
Talk openly with the other party and understand what the financial expectations are going to be. You have to have a very direct understanding of what they will be contributing, what you will be contributing, and what the expectations would be. Of course, this would be the essence for the cohabitation agreement, which eventually would be drafted. And really, the purpose of that agreement is to make sure that there is predictability and stability between if the relationship does deteriorate, so both parties know fairly what to expect.
Patty Levitt-Reid joins us now for more on this topic. That was a great interview. And just to viewers, if you want to see that again, that will be on our website at bnn.ca, because there was a lot in there. And anybody who's in that situation might want to have a second look because there was so much detail in there.
You know, Paul, I think the fact is that we've often heard about prenuptial agreements, marriage contracts put into place when there's an inequality of people in terms of their finances entering into a relationship. And sometimes that's swayed to a younger individual, or maybe even someone midway through their life. But what we are seeing is the rise of gray divorce is happening. Children have left. Wealth has been accumulated, the settlement has happened, but that doesn't mean that people don't move on in their lives. And it's a very, very touchy subject for those who have family members who feel that they've been with their parents their whole life, and maybe they're entitled to something down the road. And how do you deal with that, and how can you make sure that that's still put into place? And it's a hard thing to do, because at the end of the day, if all the money's gone to the remaining spouse, or they've split, it's still their money.
You asked a good question, whether children are sometimes acting in their best interest or their parents' best interest in terms of protecting the will. What did you think of his answer?
Yeah, I thought it was a bit of a brush off a little bit, because there are many adult children, depending on even where they live, that are getting some form of financial help from their parents, and their lifestyles have become very accustomed to it. And if all of a sudden that were to end, that means the lifestyle changes. And so there's a lot more disruption here than simply, you know, protecting the wealth for down the road.
Certainly, Jeff, as people get older, as the population ages, and people look at life relationships a little differently, these type of concerns become more and more common.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, if you think about, this is what we're hearing in the advisory network every day. Essentially, you know, you would work for 30 or 40 years, you'd get your gold watch, and then 5 or 10 years later, maybe it would be over, it being life. And we have a senior advisor.
Wow, that's one way to put it.
This was, you know, years ago, if you had a life expectancy of 70, that was perhaps the reality. Now, we have a senior advisor to the Wisdom Tree who's saying that the child born today has a 50-50 chance of living to be 100.
Right.
And so now what you're starting to see a lot in talks about the way the 21st century is going to go, in careers and in life, there's a lot of hypotheses that you'll have your early stage youthful career, 25 to 40 years old. Maybe that's when you also have your younger stage youthful wife, and then, you know, you kind of transition. You're seeing these divorces, and you're seeing kind of the second life starting at 60, 70, 80 years of age.
Well, that's an interesting way of putting it.
Not in my household. We're keeping the same wife in my household.
You could be in trouble with that. The youthful wife, and then... Okay, anyway, I digress.
I'm not sure they see us back in Chicago. Let's hope not, perhaps. That's Patty Levitt-Reid. We will take a break. Up next, we'll have the day's top business headlines.